Well, it's really not a bad day for the 1st of December. It's about 4 degrees out, and that thing up in the sky, I don't know what that is. I haven't seen that for a while. Anyway, it's nice to see the sunshine. But I am going in here to the shop today. You can hear the furnace humming away there in the background. And welcome back. Today we're going to do a little bit of work on some ignition points. Now before I get started, I just wanted to say that I did a whole video up on this bike last week of tuning it up, and I especially concentrated on setting the ignition timing and the ignition points, and then I promptly lost all my clips and ruined the friggin' video. So anyhow, I just wanted to say one thing about ignition points. All the bikes in this shop that I own are all running on ignition points, and they're all running on the original ignition points. So don't think that you need to replace your ignition points every time you clean them up. Anyway, I'm going to start with something over here. I need to clean the bench up first, but I've gotten into my piles of bits and pieces and selected out a few good examples that I can use to show you how to clean up a set of points and what to look for in these, especially these old Lucas ones. But you can apply a lot of what I've got to say about these to Nippon Denso ignition systems as well. So without further ado,
oh, behold ignition points and all their terrifying glory. Anyway, these ones have already been set up and timed and cleaned, so there's not really much point in me showing you anything on these. But if you will follow me over to the bench here, we're going to find something a little bit different. As I mentioned, I went through my boxes of spare parts, and I have plenty. Anyway, I selected out a couple of a nice couple of grody sets of points. There's no point in doing this on a clean plate. You're not going to learn much from that. So I selected up a set of ignition points. Let me just get something that I can point properly with here to things. A nice little awl here. Okay, you can see that the screws and the adjusters, the cam adjusters, are all in nice shape on this really grubby, dirty looking set of ignition points. And these two little spots right here are the actual points. This that you can see moving here is the actual motion that the points would have as that cam turns around inside of that. Now that particular cam happens to be out of a Triumph like the ones we just looked at, so the timing advance on that would turn in the clockwise direction like that, in other words, to come up on advance. Anyway, most of these bikes, the timing is set at full advance. Whatever you're working on, follow whatever instructions are in the manual for your particular machine. They may be different from one to another, but on these Lucas ones especially, there's a little mark right here that you can see on that ignition cam. That's the mark you line up with the shoe. You line that up with the shoe of the cam right there when you're setting your point gap. And it's important that you have your point gap set correctly before you set the ignition timing on your engine. So anyway, I'm going to put this in the tripod so it doesn't wiggle around, and we'll discuss this a little bit further. So I think I've got that pretty much focused in where I want to be. So I will show you some things on here. There are a few things that wear out on these, And probably the most important is the timing advance itself. Like I mentioned before, this one turns in a clockwise position. That will be advance, and that's your idle position. As the engine speed increases, these two flyweights that I have my thumbs and finger on here now, they push out, and as you can see, that cam will move in a clockwise direction. So that's telling me, just by the by, that this is probably a set of ignition from a Triumph, because and plus it has this little notch. A lot of them don't have that. That notch fits over a pin inside the exhaust cam, so that when you install these, there's no guesswork with the Triumph. With a BSA or a Norton, it's just a plain taper like that, and you put them in a certain position, and hope you've got it correct enough to get things right. What wears out on these little springs, these ones are in really nice shape, and everything seems to be all right on this timing advance. So if I ever need to use this timing advance on another bike, I know I can go ahead and use this one, because the springs are in good shape. If they're all loose and floppy, if someone's pulled them off and stretched them out, then you probably need to replace them, because if you stretch them out, it'll go into full advance too soon. But the other thing that wears out on these, and I've taken the liberty of removing the springs and stuff from this one, is this shaft here will become worn, so that the cam itself will flop around on there. Now this one is slightly worn, but the great thing about that is I can feel that moving. You really shouldn't be able to feel much in the way of movement on there. So if I was going to put this timing advance on a motorcycle, what I would do first is remove the flyweights and the cam from the rotor. Be very careful with the springs, as I mentioned. But this area here, I would turn that down to get a nice smooth surface. Then I'd make up a bronze bushing to press on over here, and I would machine that bronze bushing down to fit the hole in the cam. That way I'd have a nice close fit, because if these get too loose and rattly, you wind up that especially if you're looking at the timing marks on the engine with the engine running with a strobe light, you're going to see those timing marks drifting back and forth a little bit. That's because of the wear that's in that shaft there. So this is one of the important things. Anytime you're doing maintenance on this, just put a little drop of oil inside there. You don't even have to take it apart. Just, put a nice little drop of fine machine oil in there, so that it's lubricated and it's not going to wear away at the shaft. I mean, these things will run for 50 years before they're worn out. But anyway, they can be repaired. That's one of the things I like about point systems, is they're quite repairable. So I'm not going to need that anymore. I'm going to put that over there in the box with the rest of the stuff. And I'm just going to keep that out for now. But the first thing I need to do with this little points plate, it's so dirty that I'm going to take it all apart and clean it up. The first thing I want to do is just get all the screws out of here, take everything off, and put it over in the parts washer and get all this old gray buckety crap off of there. Lord knows that came out of a bike that had been running, but Lord knows how long it had been sitting there. So I'm going to start taking that apart. I'll show you what I've got when I get it apart. Okay, now I'll remove the points from the backing plate. So the backing plate, that's ready to be cleaned up. But the points, they're pretty dirty, so I'm going to have to take them apart as well. So it's a matter of removing this screw right here, and taking the points right off of there. And of course I need to take this little nut off of here that holds the spring in place. And do not lose those little plastic insulating washers when you take these apart, because you're going to need those when you put it back together. It's very important to have the insulators in place. That fiber washer goes underneath the spring, and that little nylon one goes inside. So now I have the points apart. What I'm looking at right now is the face, the actual contact face. These are your contact points right here and right here. But I need them to be as nice and flat and smooth. And the best way to achieve that is with a nice piece of fine garnet paper, like anything from about 220 to 320 would be aggressive enough to clean them without being too aggressive. But I prefer to use garnet paper because the garnet doesn't stick in the metal like emery or carborundum would. You can use emery or carborundum if you want to, but you have to make sure you really clean that metal after you do that, because if you don't, that emery or carborundum will embed itself in the surface of that points metal, and you literally will not get contact from your contact points from that. So best to use, in my opinion at least, best to use garnet paper for that. So I'm going to bring this up really close, and hopefully the camera will focus on that. Oh, wait a minute. I'm actually zoomed in quite a bit here, so I'm going to zoom back out. Now, I think you can see that, but if I point to it, this area right here needs to be flat and smooth in order to make sure I have a good contact. And there's nothing magical about these. All they are, here we go again, there's the other contact right there. When they go together like this, all they are is a little mechanical switch. That's it. Let me get the spring up over that post there. So the cam will push against this little shoe here and open the points at the exact moment when the engine should fire. So that's all it is. It's just a switch. It's just a switch. So let's get these points cleaned up, and we'll get on with that, and then we'll see where we go from there. Okay. I've got most of the oil and grime cleaned off of those points and off the backing plate as well. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag this little piece of very fine garnet paper between those ignition points. Now this is what you would do in the bike, because most of the time you do not take the points out of the bike to clean them, but you would stick them in between ignition points like that and just pull that garnet paper out between those points. And there's usually not a lot of light down inside the timing case on a motorcycle. So after you think you've got these cleaned up, if the garnet paper is stiff enough, you can actually push it in and out between the points like that. And you can actually use a points file in here too if you have such a thing. I used to have one, but they wear out really quickly, and I find out the garnet paper works just as well as far as I'm concerned. And the great thing is, if the garnet paper gets worn or dirty, you just tear the end off and start with a fresh piece. So anyway, I'm just going to keep dragging that in and out between them points till I figure they're nice and clean. And I do mean figure, because you never know till you actually look at them. I'm going to grab my flashlight here, because even here on the workbench underneath the light, it doesn't hurt to have a little bit of extra illumination. And hopefully this light isn't so bright that it ruins the video. see now, I'll try not to shine too much light on there. Alright, I'm just going to do this for my own benefit now. Put that, oh yeah, that stationary point is very clean. Now the moving point, that's very clean too. So those are ready to go back in service, except for a good cleaning. And what I have to clean them off, because you don't want any of that grit left in there when you're done. So what I like to do is take a little bit of lacquer thinner, or you can spray on some points cleaner, because hey, that's what it's for. Just don't turn on your ignition switch until after you're sure the darn stuff is dry, because many types of points cleaner are actually flammable. So I'm just going to wash them up there like that. If you want to be really sure, you can just take a little piece of cardboard and drag it out between the points. That way, if there's anything in there, it will take it out on that. So yeah, that's that little piece of cardboard in there. Now, I'll take one more look at that with the flashlight. Yes, that's pretty darn clean. Let me get that up close to the camera and see if I can show it to you really close. See if I can get enough light in there to, I don't know how well you can see that. Try to get the light in there so it's a little brighter. But that's clean on that side. And it's clean on that side. So that's ready to go. I'll just give it one more little clean up before I put it back on the points plate, but I'll work on the other set. This set right here next. This set is, this is the before. Now you see that gungy looking, that point on the movable one there? That's really dirty looking. And that one there is not so bad. There's a little pit on it. I don't worry too much about the pits. It's the raised portions that cause you problems. Because if there's a raised portion on that point, when you go to stick a feeler gauge in between there to do your gap, then you're not going to get a correct reading, because the feeler gauge will get caught on the on that raised portion. So anyway, let's do the same thing we did to that set. Just drag that piece of garnet paper through there and see if we can clean that up. Okay, I've reassembled this back together. What I wanted to mention to you before we go have a look at the actual bike, I wanted to mention, don't forget to put these little insulating washers back where they belong. Because the idea is for the power to go from the clip right here, which is underneath that plastic insulator, to the ignition points, not to go like it would right here from the post to the ground, because then you won't get any spark at all. The electricity will take the path of least resistance and it'll go right to ground instead of going through the points. So like I said, the clip in this case would go under there, because you want the clip to touch the spring, but you don't want any of that stuff to touch any ground. So that's why you would put that insulating washer in there like that, and then put your little nut on there to hold all that in place. If I can get it to start. I don't know if it's going to or not. It was on there before. Anyway, I'll worry about that later. But so anyhow, this is what you would see in the bike. When you clean up your points, let me just grab that little piece of garnet paper again. You would be in here. You might need to pull open the points with a screwdriver, but you would drag your little piece of paper out of the points like that. You would do all this in situ unless you had a real problem with the points and you had to file them. In that case, you would take the points out like I just did and do it that way. But anyway, let's have a look at the triangle over there. There goes the furnace again. You know it's cold out when that's coming on, so we'll go over and have a look at the Triumph and go over the next part of the procedure. Now, I think if you can see this set of points half decent on this particular bike. So I'm just going to check the one set of points. I've already done these and I've set the timing, but I just wanted to show you how you get a rough idea how you do it. You see this little mark right here on that cam is pointing directly at the shoe on the set of points. That's the position you want to be in when you're setting the gap on the points. So I know these, like I said, these are already done anyway, but I wanted to show you how you would go about doing that. So I'm just going to take that set. That's a 15 thou feeler gauge, and it's clean. Always make sure it's clean. You don't want to stick a dirty feeler gauge in between a nice clean set of points, because all the work you've gone to will be for nothing. So you're just going to slide that in there. And what you want is just to feel the very slightest drag between those ignition points, so you know you've actually got the right gap in there. And that is perfect, because I can just barely feel that feeler gauge dragging in there, and it's not pushing the points open at all any further, so I know that point gap is set right. If it wasn't set right, then I would loosen off that screw right there and adjust the gap with this little cam right here. Some types of bike don't have that little cam adjuster, and that's okay. You can get away without it. But anyway, then I will rotate the engine around again, so that little mark right there on the ignition cam is facing the shoe on this set of points. And I would do the same thing with the feeler gauge that I've actually done, and if I need to adjust it, I would. Now, the timing itself is a little bit more involved. I like to use a plunger that goes in behind the cylinders. The plunger looks like that. This is one that I've made up myself, and this part, like I said, there's a plug you take out behind the cylinder, and I just screw that into the plug hole. When you're in the right position, that plunger will drop down into the flywheel and lock you at the full advanced position. The other way to do it on these bikes is with the mark on the flywheel, but I don't always, not the flywheel, geez, on the rotor for the generator rotor. Yeah. There's a mark on that you can line up with the pointer on the cover, and I don't usually like to do that unless I've checked it first with that plunger affair to make sure that it is correct. But on this bike, I know that it is, because there's a new rotor in it and stuff. So, but anyways, the other way you can check the timing is of course with a strobe light. But what I like to do when I'm setting the timing on this is I'll put a little light, literally a 12-volt light bulb, across the wire here to the ground. I'll turn the ignition on, and then when the points open up, the light will come on, right? So what you want is when the ignition's in the advanced position, or the engine, I say, is in the advanced position, and you have the light hooked up and the ignition key on, when you push the cam here into the advanced position, that light should just come on at that very instant that you've reached the end of the travel on that advanced cam there. So anyway, I won't go into too much detail on that, because I don't really want to take this bike apart again to show you that. But anyway, follow the instructions in your manual. Points are not magic. Like I said, they're just a simple little switch, and all you got to have is that they're cleaned up, they're gapped right, and setting the ignition timing is not a big deal. It usually takes me about 20 minutes per bike
whenever I get them ready for the spring. And this time I happen to be doing it on the very first day of meteorological winter, but that way in the springtime this bike will be all ready to go. I won't have to do anything except change the oil in it. So anyway, that wraps up my little points tutorial. And like I said before, every bike I own runs on points, and they're all original. The original ignition points, although I do have some replacements here. If you ever broke a spring or something, it's good to have one. But yeah, don't be afraid of them. They're just a switch, and that's exactly what happens with your Boyer electronic ignition or your Payson ignition or whatever. It's just a switch. And especially if you're running through the standard coils like in that, the coils are what makes the spark, not the ignition system. If you want a hotter spark, you need to put hotter coils in. Anyway, that's it for this. I'm going to call this quits for now. So thanks for watching. I hope you got something out of it. It was really meant for, people who are nervous about points and that. A lot of us old guys are very familiar with this stuff. So anyway, I hope you got something out of it. So you can like and share and subscribe if you want to. And thanks very much for watching, and be good to each other.